edition of the Let's Talk Broncos podcast. Bree Maestas, Zach Seegers, Joey Richards missing in action, but that's all right. We have a full show for you tonight. Denver Broncos take on the Miami Dolphins this Sunday. I don't have a whole lot of confidence, but we're going to talk about why and why not. First of all, though, I want to ask you, Zach Seegers, how about them Buffs?
Man, it's going to be a tough matchup this week, but first top 25 on top 25 matchup of the prime era. I'm excited to watch it. I do want to correct a little something though. Joey isn't here. I don't know if it is okay. He consistently, Bree, rubs in his face how he's showing up. He's the first one in the StreamYard call or whatever. Okay, you're sick. You're dealing with a cold. I'm sick. If you can't hear it over the mic. Joey, only member of the podcast completely healthy. Only member of the podcast to call out tonight. Why? So we can go out partying with friends. So let's just really clearly, let's put it on the record. Let's get it on the record why Joey is missing the podcast tonight.
Zach, I wouldn't call it completely healthy because Joey Richards is catching strays right now. He's not here to defend himself, and so we're going to talk all that shit. Hope he's having fun while we're here. Both myself and Zach, as he's already alluded to, have a little bit of the sniffles, but that's okay. We wanted to be here to talk and preview the game. We're going to give some bold predictions. We're going to give some score predictions. We're going to walk through the injury report that got released. Obviously, I think the news of the week is going to be Justin Simmons out officially on Sunday, which leaves, I believe, 3 safeties for the Denver Broncos: JL Skinner, Kareem Jackson, DTY, and then Asang Bassi can potentially drop down in that role. How do you feel about where the Broncos are presently right now with their defensive backs?
Horrible. I mean, awful. It's one, you're going up against the offense that is putting defensive backs in the worst position of any team in the league. And that's, in part because of the talent, but also because of how smart Mike McDaniel is at setting his guys up. We talked about it some on the Wednesday show, but what he's doing with pre-snap motion to get these guys moving before the snap and these free releases, I saw it with a lot of the hey Dante. I saw it with a lot of the week 1 discourse with the Chargers game. It's like, hey, you can't let Tyreek Hill do that to you. You got to press him on the line of scrimmage. It's like they're trying. Teams are trying to press Tyreek Hill on the line of scrimmage. Mike McDaniel is not giving teams that answer anymore. You cannot stop the Miami Dolphins that way. You got to find a new solution. And God, I don't know. I think Patrick Surtain will hold his own because he's Patrick Surtain and he's just like so controlled and so athletically gifted that I think he'll be okay. I'm sure he's going to give 1 or 2 up though, just because this offense is that deadly. But everything else, like honestly, he might not give 1 or 2 up because why go at Surtain when this? I mean, Damari Mathis should be easy pickings. This safety room, like I love Kareem Jackson. Even though we've butted heads on him in the past, the one area of his game that concerns me at this point in his career is, I mean, outside of the helmet stuff, is deep coverage. What's he going to be asked to do a lot of in this game? Deep coverage against like complex schemes, complex concepts rather. I hate it. And then next to him, you're looking at De'Aaron Turner-Yell, maybe getting his first career start. This it is. I don't know if you could have cooked up a worse week. I don't think you could. You couldn't have cooked up a worse week to have this secondary meltdown, Bree. It's terrifying.
It is terrifying. There's a lot of Denver-Miami connections, some weird ones, some not so weird ones. Obviously, Vic Fangio meeting his, I'm not even going to say rival, previously being the coach of the Denver Broncos, and now he's in Miami. I think there's no bad blood. I think he's happy with the situation that he has. I know Joey would be here pumping air right now just because he wants to so much bring him up on the show at every point possible. But with the contention that the Denver Broncos are facing right now with Vance Joseph being the defensive coordinator, how much of a storyline is this when really it is a lot about the talent and depth in the defense right now that seems to be causing the issues? Is it a Vance Joseph problem? Would Vic Fangio fix this? I don't know. There's a lot of conversations going on about that. Is there anything that you want to add to that narrative as we're going to be staring directly across the field of Vic Fangio come Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, would this defense be better with one of the elite defensive coordinators, one of the elite defensive minds of the last 20 years? Absolutely. Would it be a good defense? I don't think so. I mean, maybe they could pull something out of their butt, but you look at Ejiro Evero, a guy who I think all of Broncos country respects as a defensive coordinator. I've said it once, I'll say it a million times. The defense post Bradley Chubb trade last year under Ejiro Evero was 23rd in the league. And the arguments I've heard against that is, well, they played the Chiefs twice. Like it's just, well, if you remove all the games they were bad, which were against the Chiefs and against the Rams, well, you can't count the Rams game, even though it was Baker Mayfield at quarterback and he dropped a 50 burger on him because they quit. I mean, how do you quantify that? But then they didn't quit the next week, and I just, that part annoys me. If you want to give benefit of the doubt to the defense that it wasn't a talent issue and they just decided to quit down the second half of last season, and now this year they also happen to be bad, then sure, it's all on Vance Joseph. I think it's a serious talent deficiency. Let's not forget they traded Von Miller. Like, I know that's a few years back now, but he was the ace in that edge rushing room. Yes, they had Bradley Chubb. Yes, they had other pieces. Von Miller was the ace in that pass rushing room. You remove him from the equation. Okay. Then it falls to like Bradley Chubb, and they end up signing Randy Gregory. Bradley Chubb's been traded, and Randy Gregory has not looked like Randy Gregory since his most recent injury. He has not been an impactful force. So you're banking on Jonathan Cooper, a former 7th-round pick, who I think is a good player, but is always meant to be a rotational player. He's been called up to start in the past, and he's done a fine job, but he's never been an impact pass rusher. Benito is developing some, but really they're kind of relying on Benito to be their pass rushing ace, and that's just not the position Nick Benito should be in at this point. We already talked about the shambles the secondary is in. Like, the interior defensive line is so rough. This is a very talent poor defense, and again, George Paton is to blame for that. He's been running the show for 3 years now.
There was a quick sneak in of where I thought you were going with all of that, with George Paton now catching strays. So Joey, George Paton shaking hands in the. I get it. It's understandable. When you bring up the fact that Von Miller was never really, that production was never really replaced. You can't replace that talent. You're not going to find another Von Miller, but you could find something appreciably comparable when you're talking about a really important piece of the Denver Broncos defense in that edge position. So yeah, it's a little bit frustrating when you're not seeing that level of production. Going to be going up against Tua on Sunday. I could see Tua getting over 400 yards pretty easily against this defense, but what'll limit him there is Waddle is questionable, and Tyreek Hill has been a little bit of a limited participant, although the last 2 days he has been full. USMC Sniper 123 mentioned earlier that he had heard Hill might actually be on a limited snap count enduring that ankle injury as of late. Thank you, USMC, for dropping that comment over on YouTube. If you'd like to do the same, you can go on over to YouTube, search Let's Talk Broncos. We're live right now, talking a little bit about the game that's coming up on Sunday. I'm nervous. As you can tell, I'm fidgeting a little bit because I don't know what to expect from this game. My hopes are not high. And if you watched us on Wednesday doing the breakdown on that Let's Talk That's Good Broncos, still don't know the name of that show with Brandon Perna and Will Keys, you would have heard a lot of the same. I think there is a little bit of a downtrend on where Broncos country and the like are with this team, and going up against the Miami Dolphins, who have a chance to go 3-0 on Sunday. It's really hard not to see where the pain ends. If the Broncos end up going 0-3, basically all hopes at a playoff run, a miraculous resurgence for Russell Wilson this season are gone. And I know a lot of people get frustrated with that conversation because they think that you've just become a naysayer of such. But we said the first 4 games were going to be a great indicator as to how fast this team was going to turn it around. The offense is looking good. The defense is not. And we know that kind of imbalance does not make a very strong team.
It doesn't, but I will say Russell Wilson, I think at this point, and he's playing well this season, I'm not critiquing him, but I think at this point we can acknowledge that he's not the superhuman he was in Seattle in like 2015, 2016, let's say, where he really was one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL for close to a decade. I think we can look at that and say he's probably not that guy anymore. He's maybe lost a step. He's not quite as accurate as he once was, but he's still playing really well this season. I think the fact that Sean Payton you saw what a bad offensive mind could do with Russell Wilson last year. It was a tire fire on offense. And then you see what Sean Payton can do with that same asset. And look at him in New Orleans. Look at what he did with Jameis Winston compared to his other coordinators. Look at what Jameis Winston's other coordinators, that is. Look at what he did with Taysom Hill. Look at what he did with Teddy Bridgewater versus Teddy Bridgewater in Denver. I think that's hugely promising. And defense is something that year to year has a high variance rate. You're depending on the performance of not just 11 guys, but because of how defenses rotate like 16 guys. While offense, if you've got the quarterback figured out, if you've got the offensive play caller figured out, the rest can kind of fall into place. And that's what you're seeing right now. I don't know if Russell Wilson, as that contract spikes, is the long-term answer at quarterback, but you've got to feel so optimistic, I think, with the head coach. Like, yes, it's not turning over in the win-loss column yet, and that's frustrating for people that hoped this could be a playoff run year. You had 2 of your easiest games on the schedule. You lost both of them. Playoff run looking pretty unlikely right now. But for the future of the Denver Broncos, the direction this franchise needs to go, I think it's actually very promising. Sean Payton, we both know he was heavily involved in the front office this offseason. His draft picks are looking pretty good. The offense is looking pretty good. Maybe you don't like the free agency signing still, but I think stock's up on the franchise as a whole, even if it's not showing in the win-loss column. I don't think it'll show this weekend either, but I think things are going up. Fingers crossed.
Are you feeling okay? Are you on cold medicine? Like, are we both, or just sort of wafting through this reality? Because a lot of optimism coming from Zach Seegers. I know Dante is probably clutching his pearls right now, not expecting that sort of optimism. But I think you have.
I'm not a pessimist, Bree. I'm a realist. Okay, what? I'm a pessimist because I said Drew Lock was bad. Guess what?
What are you big? Strays are ridiculous.
Everyone's catching strays this show. I'm sorry. It is the cold medicine, Bree.
Who else should we pick? You start bringing up Teddy Bridgewater for no fucking apparent reason, but here we are.
But I said he was bad in Denver and good in New Orleans. I did. I threw you a bone there, Bree. I
didn't. Is that you will do that so very often is we'll go to blows. You, much like you were bringing up Kareem Jackson earlier, that you were like, listen, I know we've butted heads. We butted heads for 365 days. Joey Richards in the chat making an appearance. Suck it up, guys. I don't know.
Hope the drinks are good. Hope the drinks are good. Hope the bars are good, man. Yeah, we're working. We're doing our job that we're obligated to do, but hope the drinks are good, man.
I didn't have plans or anything with, special implications. What did you say? My mom just texted me saying you were giving me grief.
Thank you, Mama Richards. Thank you. Happy birthday to Joey. Of course, we have to give Joey / your son some grief.
Dante, attaboy. He's happy that you're being less pessimistic than usual. We got to keep him in line somehow. USMC Sniper has a Drew Lock comment. I'm not highlighting it.
On the rabbit hole.
I can't do it. I appreciate your comments, USMC, but Zach and I will go to blows. We'll no longer be friends. He'll have to find a new podcast. It'll be 45 minutes of me crying, and I don't really think I can handle that tonight. But I know you didn't come here to hear us lament about our friendship issues. You wanted to know about bold predictions for Sunday's game. I think we'll jump right into that next. Joey Richards, if you have one, drop it in the chat. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go first. I like mine because I picked him up in fantasy recently. Mario Vitanzi, the shirt that I'm wearing over here, says he fleeced me. But honestly, I did my research over here, traded for Raheem Mostert. I'm going to say he gets a first half touchdown on Sunday. I don't think that's, remarkably bold. I think that's something that we can definitely go with. How do you feel about that one, Zach?
I like it. I like it a lot. And by the way, I like your trade that you got there with Mario. You did give him a good wide receiver, but Mostert's been a really good running back this year. And I think Drake London's production is going to go up. I think he's underrated right now. I could be wrong. It is a bold prediction. I think Raheem Mostert anytime touchdown would have been bold enough. And the fact you go first half, I like that. That's playing the game. Especially because maybe the Dolphins have a lead in the second half, and maybe he's more likely to get a second half touchdown, if anything. I like it. I'll gladly take you up on this.
Okay. Honestly, with a little bit of the issue in the wide receiver group, I think Tua is going to just need a little bit of help. I think they may run early, fast, and often. Also, considering the defensive line for the Broncos hasn't been protecting that run as best as we'd like it. Let's be honest, though, they haven't been protecting against the pass either. So, really, I'm swinging for the low hanging fruit.
Yeah, no, I like it. I'm for it. Do you want me to throw out Joey's bold prediction?
Yeah, but I want to let me get to Dante's real quick. He's throwing one
Yeah.
in the chat here. He says Florida boy prediction. Not sure what that means, but I think it's better than Florida
They're both
man.
Floridas.
Oh,
Florida
okay,
boys.
got it. Oh, I knew that. I thought he was saying he was from Florida, and I was
You
going to
might
tell
also
Dante.
be.
Dante, drop your location in the chat. Not an address, though. That would be creepy. Jerry gets a touchdown, and PS2 gets a pick six. Sadly, we still lose. That would actually be incredible. Picking a pick six is entirely too bold for this program, though, Dante. I think you're also on some cold medicine.
Yeah, we'll gladly take you up on that one, Dante. Send the drinks to Denver.
Go ahead and give me Joey's.
Yeah, Joey here. I like what where Joey's mind's at here. He's saying 100 rushing yards for Javonte Williams and at least 16 carries. I don't know how much the 16 carries is adding. I feel like if he's getting 100 yards, he's probably carrying the ball at least 16 times. But that's what he's going with, and not 100 total yards, 100 rushing yards. It would be one of the best rushing days for Javonte Williams of his career. I'll see if I can pull that up really quick. But he hasn't sneakily, and he's a very good running back. It's just he's operated in a split backfield his whole career. But that's also true this year still. He's seldom gone over 100 yards. So personally, I'm gladly taking Joey. Yeah, he's gone over 100 yards twice in his career. I'm taking Joey up on this one.
Do you know what the defensive efficiency is against the run for the Dolphins?
I sure do. 31st in the NFL. So that's part of it, right? I think, and you want to keep that high-powered offense off the field. I see where Joey's brain is going here. Like, if the Broncos win this game, it's probably because the run game, they're able to run the ball really well and limit the number of possessions. I think it's a smart prediction. My one thing is, one, Javonte Williams hasn't gone there too much. The Broncos have a split backfield. And also, I could see the Broncos getting in a negative game script, meaning they're trailing really early, and all of a sudden they're having to pass the ball a lot to catch up. And that, I think, would eat into Javonte Williams' carries. But Miami, to answer your question, 31st in EPA per play against the run, and 32nd in rushing success rate, which means the percentage of plays in which they're allowing a positive run.
Luis Gutierrez hopping in the chat over here has a fun one. 3 TDs for Russ and a dub. I really appreciate how optimistic you're all being. I don't like it.
I could see the 3 Russ TDs. I could see the 3 Russ TDs.
To whom? Who's going to be those 3 receivers? Brandon Johnson,
Judy is due for one, and you know, maybe Judy gets 2, maybe Sutton gets 1. I feel like Sutton's due 2 after that bogus no call on the PI. Hey, Russ had 3 touchdowns last week. He had 2 the first week. He's cooking a little. Cooking. I think it's cooking with training wheels, but it is maybe cooking.
You know those cooking videos on TikTok where those little mini chefs are like cooking with like the plastic utensils?
Yeah.
And I'm not comparing it. I'm just saying that's what it made me think of when he said cooking with training wheels. No, Russ is playing great. I think it's a lot better.
I think it's more like when you leave your kids at home for the night. You know, they're like middle school or whatever, and they don't know how to cook anything. But you're like, here, make the Kraft mac and cheese. You know, and like, are they technically cooking? Yes, but it's like there are regimented instructions and regimented like seasoning amount. It's in the packet. You tear it out. You don't even have to measure a thing. It's orchestrated. The only problem is you can hold the pot over the thing for too long rather than getting rid of the water and, you know, getting things on with staying on schedule. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. Have you ever seen the psychosis that is mixing the cheese into the milk while you boil the noodles in it?
Wait. Mixing the cheese into the milk while you boil the noodles in the milk.
Yeah, so you put like your liquid in the pan and you turn
Uh-huh.
that on, and then you dump your noodles and your cheese, and you kind of just like make, and then you like bring that to a boil. Have you seen that?
Oh, that's new.
Don't do it. You gotta like strain your noodles and rinse
Okay,
them
well, yeah, it
off.
didn't sound like it was very good, but
I
I thought
wouldn't
you were
do
trying
it.
to make a recommendation.
But that was not a recommendation. I was just seeing it on TikTok and I was like, that is the iPad kids that don't know how to cook who are now like responsible for feeding themselves. And now they're stuck with Kraft mac and cheese made the very wrong way. But we've gone off the rails
Cold medicine.
and that's what happened. We're both medicated. And Zach, I need to know your bold prediction for Sunday. Oh wait,
Yeah,
I'm not taking I don't think
you're
this is
not
gonna
taking
happen.
Philly.
I don't think this is gonna happen though. So I'm taking the bet.
You are taking the bet.
I
Okay,
get this
there you
wrong
go.
every single time.
It's all good. Okay, mine is a little complicated. So people have to it's 3 steps here. I've got a bit of a parlay going. So first, Saturday, you're going to be watching the Buffs game. Let's talk Buffs. I've got the Colorado Buffaloes covering against Oregon. Spreads 21 points. So Buffs lose by less than 21 points or they win. That's step 1. That has to happen. Step 2, the Broncos, or sorry, not the Broncos, the Dolphins cover against the Broncos. So I think the Dolphins win by at least a touchdown. Okay. If the Dolphins win by less than that, or the Broncos win, I'm done. Step 3, the Broncos lose by more to the Dolphins than the Buffs lose to the Ducks by, or the Buffs win. So I said that in a very confusing way. I either need step 3 is I either need the Buffs to win or I need their margin of defeat to be lesser than the Broncos' margin of defeat. Right. So that's basically the rundown. I'm basically saying the Buffs game will be closer than the Broncos game or the Buffs will win.
Okay, well, walk me through your reasoning for this because an interesting matchup is taking place. I'm a little scared about the Buffs going to Oregon and covering a 21-point spread without the best player on the team. Although you could say Shador Sanders makes a fighting chance, but he doesn't play the ball both ways. So talk to me a little bit how you think they'll actually reduce the. So you think they'll still lose, maybe, perhaps, perchance,
But I
but
think
not as bad as the Broncos lose to the Dolphins.
no, I look at the Broncos Dolphins matchup, and that's like a really rough matchup. I think the Dolphins or the Broncos might be able to hang on offense, but the Dolphins should be able to move the ball up and down the field, like even without Jalen Waddle, even with Tyreek Hill on a snap count. This is going to be the best offense the Broncos have faced so far by a good margin, and I think this defense is going to struggle a ton. So that's part 1 of the logic. Part 2 is everyone's talking about how CU is going to get boat raced by Oregon this week. I don't see it. Oregon lit up a bad Hawaii team. Hawaii is consistently one of the worst FBS schools. They lit up an FCS school, and then they played one Power 5 opponent, one top 100 program, frankly, and they really struggled with Texas Tech. And you look at what Texas Tech has done this season. It's lose to Wyoming. It's and then they have another embarrassing game. I forget their other game this season. It's not a good team. So it's going to be a tough game for the Buffs, but Oregon's got a weak secondary. I think Oregon's weaknesses match the Buffs well in a similar way to how the Broncos' weaknesses match Miami well. And even though like Otson's so hard to play, I think I'd still ultimately pick Oregon to win that game. I think CU's got a better chance in that one than the Broncos do in this one. And when I saw the lines this week, CU being a 3-touchdown underdog and the Broncos being a 1-touchdown underdog, I was like, I almost feel these lines should be reversed. I wouldn't go that extreme with the Broncos, but so that's kind of what I'm hitting on with my bold prediction here.
It's an interesting conversation, and I think the narrative has been that the luck has run out for the Colorado Buffaloes, but I think that they've just been progressing so much as a team and a unit that I could see them shocking the nation, not necessarily upsetting Oregon, but I could see it being a lot closer than people are anticipating. I do think they'll cover the spread, although it only changed by 1 touchdown with the announcement that Travis Hunter was going to be out for a couple of weeks with that liver laceration. So it's interesting to think where did the other 14 points come from? Is it really the overvaluation of the Buffs? And I refuse to think that way. So, okay, Zach, I think I like that bet. Dante said, I think the Buffs and Broncos both cover, but we both lose. I could see that one happening. But
I would lose in that case.
I think the Buffs will lose by less than the Broncos lose by. Is that,
Then you're in agreement with me. Then you're not taking the bet. I like it. All right. We'll be rolling with the Buffs together. Smart decision, Bree. Smart decision. You would be catching some shit this weekend, I'm sure, if you were betting against the Buffs.
I would get into a lot of trouble, and I don't want to do that. So I still want to see your bold predictions coming through. We'll get to score predictions next. Go ahead and drop that down. Wayne King, haven't heard that name in a while. Welcome back to the show over on YouTube. Says, I think Denver will lose by 17. Ouch.
Yeah. Really quick, shout out Wayne. We lost him when we lost the Facebook. So thank you, Wayne, for following us over to YouTube. We've been missing you, man. Thank you for migrating with us.
Imagine that. You're just like, I wonder what happened to them. And you like start Googling us over on YouTube. It's like a reunion. Homeward Bound. Is that the movie with all the...
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's from my childhood. I remember that movie.
If it's from my childhood, it's not from your childhood.
Well, I mean, I grew up watching it. It is from well before my childhood.
But, and that hurts even more. It's fine. Let's get into the score predictions for the evening. Do you have Joey's score prediction?
Let me vamp on that for a second and give you my score prediction while I look to see if he ever sent one.
Oh, how about I give you mine? Because I think the Broncos could potentially lose the game by 2 touchdowns. I'm going 27-13 Dolphins. And listen, I think the Broncos could shock the Dolphins. Absolutely. Because any given Sunday, any team could beat the other. I just don't think that the chances are that high. That's what a score prediction is. Who's going to win? Who's the more apt to win? And if you know me, if you watch this show, I almost more often than not, especially last season when it was bad, was picking the Broncos to win by like relatively sane amounts. And here I am, game 3 into 2023, and I'm picking the Broncos to lose. It's just where my head's at. Don't shoot me. Go and leave mean comments over on the YouTube. But it just, I think it's a 2 touchdown game, and I think it goes the way of the Dolphins.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I don't like that, but I think it's a sensible prediction. Joey, shout out to him being responsive on the texts. He didn't have a score put in, but I texted him and I was like, we need your score prediction right now. Send it in. He's going 30-17 Miami. So similar to you, almost 2 touchdowns. Despite my prediction just being that the Broncos lose by more than the Buffs lose by, I'll say, so I came up with that prediction, I'm going to be honest. And I started, as I looked at it through the week, not feeling as good about it. Now, it's the most creative, bold prediction I've come up with so far this season, and I was attached to it already, so I didn't want to lose it. But looking into this game more, I feel better about the Broncos' chances. Maybe it's me being a contrarian and seeing everyone on Twitter like, oh, the Broncos are going to get killed this week. They don't stand a chance. But we've only had 2 weeks of the season, but the Broncos compare very favorably to the Los Angeles Chargers. The Broncos are the 30th ranked defense in terms of EPA per play, right? Very bad, not good. The Chargers are 29th. So right there with them. The Broncos have the 10th best offense. The Chargers have the 7th best offense. So the Chargers are a better version of this football team, but they're very comparable in styles. And you look at that Chargers-Dolphins game, it was an offensive shootout that came down to whoever had the ball last. It took a last-second drive from Herbert and company, or from Tua and company, after Herbert scored a touchdown that easily could have, Herbert and the Chargers scored a touchdown that easily could have won the game. I do think the Broncos have a realistic chance here. I think this team is much closer to a 1-2 team than an 0-3 team. And I do think the NFL has a weird way of balancing that stuff out. If I was telling you that the Rams were going to blow out the Seahawks in week 1, you would have been flabbergasted. Like, weird stuff happens in the NFL every week. It's why people it's hard to like win a survivor pool if you've ever done one of those. So I don't know. I'm going to go Dolphins 34-27, but I think it's a good competitive game.
I mean, listen, the last two games were lost by 3 points. I get that it's like really not that far off. The offense is cooking. There's something that's really hurting my soul as a defensive minded person of considering that the Broncos are ranked 30th overall. Like that is the pit of despair for someone like me because it is so important, specifically in the AFC, to shut down quarterbacks. And here we are just saying, you know what? Don't have an answer for it. Is it Vance Joseph? I don't know. Could you maybe consider that everyone is injured on the defense at some capacity? You have the idea that Justin Simmons may play just because of the necessity, obviously ruled out, but for a while there, we're like, he kind of has to play, right? There's no other option. And when you're down to that, where your star player, one of your most talented and appreciable players on the team, where you need him to be healthy for the rest of the season if you have a chance, is having to suit up in a circumstance like this, that's not good whatsoever. So it's going to look a little bit different. Dante is just like celebrating. He's fist pumping over here. Holy hell, this is by far the happiest I've seen Zach. Friday Zach is the best Zach. Dante, I'm telling you, it's like Sudafed and a little bit of Dayquil is the only thing getting us through today.
That and it's I need to be the contrarian. When people are too down on the Broncos, I'm like, what are we doing here? There's good things, you know. And then if people are too happy about things, it's like, okay, what are we doing here?
It is so fucking annoying. Since it's just me and Zach on the show, it's like it's a great insight as to like why we fight all the time. Is I'll say something, Zach's like, you know what I feel like doing? Causing problems. And
I
you
hate
guys are
being,
lucky.
I'm sorry, I'm consistently right. I know it's a cross that like everyone in my life has to bear, and I'm sorry you have to deal with that. One thing I will say about this Broncos team, last little thought, it's really reminiscent to me of the Sean Payton Saints of the mid 2010s, where you had these really great offenses and just like laughably bad defenses. I don't know if anyone remembers those Saint teams, but they were like 31st or 32nd in every defensive metric, like year in, year out. And then finally they rebuilt the unit and they went right into competing. Again, defense is harder to build. It's harder to maintain. Offense is more steady. The fact that you're seeing the offense at this, it's frankly unbelievable. The Broncos have had a good defense for like 7-8 years in a row. You don't see that often. Like even the Steelers, who are known for having a good defense, if you look at the metrics, they've had more fluctuations during the Tomlin years. Offense is sustainable. And the fact you're seeing this so early with Sean Payton, I'm excited. So the one concern is like, does Sean Payton just go like, meh, I'm tired, I want to go back to TV? That's my one fear. If he's in this for the long haul, I really think the stock ticker on this franchise is way up. I would be buying stock right now. I'd be loading up on it. This team's 0-2. Give me all the Broncos stock because I'm going to look like a rich man. I'd probably wait until after they get blown out by the Dolphins, but then I'd be loaded up on Broncos stock. So even if Sunday goes bad, Broncos fans, optimistic for the future. It's
all right. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the ugly truth of what could potentially happen, since we're getting towards the end of the show and it's the waning hours and people are ready to get on with their Fridays and go join Joey while he's having drinks and partying while we're stuck at home. Let's talk about the idea of the Denver Broncos. Let's say they lose against Miami. Let's say week 6 and week 8 are literal dumpster fires against the Chiefs. At a midway point somewhere, Vance Joseph's seat is just hot as hell. And you ask Christian Parker to step in as your defensive coordinator. And you have to then see what the remaining pieces of your talent on the defense and what little of the secondary you have left have to kind of function off of this backbone of a defense who are working their way up the ladder. Would you or would you not? What's more likely, that you would see a jump in production because it was specifically tied to who the defensive coordinator was, or is it a roster talent issue and there's no difference whatsoever?
I mean, I would lean towards no difference. Now, I think there would be some level of difference. I think because I do think Christian Parker is such a smart defensive mind. He's come up in this system and has learned under Vic Fangio, under Ejiro Evero. I think, or Vic Fangio's background is in the front seven. But Evero's background is coaching DBs. So I think, they were probably related somewhat on that level. And he's also very highly thought of. The fact he's been retained through 3 staffs, I think. And they're asking Vance Joseph to run not his scheme. They're asking him to run the Fangio scheme. I think Christian Parker could maybe do a better job of doing that. That said, I think it would really take like a Bill Belichick, like a Vic Fangio, maybe a Steve Spagnuolo. I think it would take someone with a lot of NFL experience. Like Ejiro Evero doesn't have the DC experience, but he's been around the league under a bunch of like Hall of Fame level NFL minds. I think someone's going to have a lot of experience or a wide range of knowledge to be plugged in as the defensive coordinator of the 2023 Denver Broncos and make it a good defense. I think you have to be like top 5%, top 1% level defensive mind to make this something good. Maybe
how does it fall that far? Like, how does it fall that far in 1 year?
I think because it didn't fall that far in 1 year. I think it fell that far in like over a year and a half. I think when you talk about the Broncos, if you talk about the Broncos' dominant defense, what you're really talking about is the first half of last year and like what happened there.
Yeah.
Okay, you lost Ronald Darby. He played 4 games, but like, again, when you look at when the Broncos were really dominant, it was like best for that first quarter or for the first half, but it was consistent like decline. So you lose Ronald Darby from that mix. You lose Randy Gregory from that mix. I know he's back, but he hasn't been the same player. You lose Draymond Jones from that mix, and the expensive guy you signed isn't replacing him. You lose Deshaun Williams. That's a big one. You haven't had Justin Simmons for the whole time. That's part of it. Oh, but he also missed time last year. I think those are the big 4. I know I'm missing one. Oh, and Baron Browning. You're removing Baron Browning from the miss, who is one of your more exciting young pass rushers. Like that's enough in a defense. I talk about defense is hard to maintain because you're relying on 16 good pieces, and the Broncos took out like 6 pretty important ones, maybe 7 because Caden Stearns, and it's like, all right, it should be the same. And it's like, no, especially when you look at like where were those pieces, and I didn't even mention K1, so that would be 8. Like where those pieces are removed. 2 at corner. Okay, that's huge. 1 on the defensive line, 2 on the defensive line. That's huge. 2 at edge. That's huge. Like that's how it'd be the same thing if we were looking at like, how did this offense decline so fast? Well, they lost the quarterback. They lost their wide receiver 2 and their wide receiver 3. They lost their 3 best offensive linemen. It's like, okay, well, they have half their starters, but they don't have any of the important ones. Or not any, but they lost a lot of the important ones.
There's 2 questions. I know we were going to fade off and ride into the sunset, but there's 2 questions that I want to get to. I'm going to do Wayne's isn't a question, but he said we lost Chubb, and that was at the moment detriment to what the Broncos were trying to do, not only because it impacted the roster or the locker room, but because it impacted production there at edge. But there's been kind of a new shift in the storyline and the narrative, I think specifically as we approach Dolphins week. But the idea that maybe the less production was a grand old steal for the Broncos to trade him when they did, get the value that they did, and then not have to pay him what he got in Miami. But I still think that Chubb's producing up there in a way where the Broncos are lacking. Do you agree or disagree, Zach?
I mean, it's tough. I do think he'd be helping the Broncos where they're currently lacking right now, but I also think, like, would the Broncos have wanted to give him that contract he just signed with the Dolphins? Like, I don't think so. And had they, it would have been like a disaster. Like, he's playing better. He played better in week 2 for the Dolphins. But right now that contract is looking like an albatross. I think the other element of it is you ended up trading that pick for Sean Payton. And I think it'd be one thing if you spent that pick on like whatever rookie and it's like, oh, this rookie's not looking very good or he's looking fine and we could really use a pass rusher for our defense. But again, what I was just talking about with Sean Payton, how I think the direction of this franchise is up because he's brought I honestly think he's brought offensive stability. Again, the one thing being, does he stick around and not retire? The fact that you're relying on like practice squad level wide receivers, the offensive line is not what we were hoping it would be this offseason. And this offense is still clicking at the rate it is a huge testament to Sean Payton. And I think it was well worth losing Chubb. I think you're trading a year of bad defense for hopefully several years of good offense. And I think it's going to be painful during that year of bad defense, but it's, I think, a good trade in theory still.
I don't want to do this. I don't love it. I also don't love this conversation that I'm going to bring up, but there's some good points in here about Justin Simmons. I'm going to bring up Dante's point first here. If we only have, say, 2 wins by the deadline, do you think we would trade Jay Sims? I don't think that man can tolerate another year of stock. Let's talk about it. Hasn't had a winning season since he came into the league. Absolutely love him as a player and a human being. I don't want to see him go anywhere, but if it means Jay Sims is happy, we talked about it last year on Let's Talk Broncos around the same time. USMC Sniper also says 1 year on his contract. I wouldn't be against us moving on from any players that are in the Elway regime. There's a little bit of feelings towards Elway's time here with the Broncos, slowly but surely getting up there in age. So yeah, there's a lot of good points there. I don't love the conversation, but I think if by any means necessary that you do see, if the defense is no longer a rebuildable process with the current talent that you have, that could be a potential move for the Denver Broncos. It does, however, spell X marks the spot for not only a rebuild, but it's not a win now circumstance for the Denver Broncos. And that's hard to swallow, at least as a fan first.
Yeah. And that is something that I do think has to be mentioned. I've been positive this show, and I do think, again, generally speaking, direction is up. If the Broncos are in that position this year, this year's been a failure. This offseason, their moves are very clear in terms of what they were doing. They were spending money to win games right now, while Russ's contract is still, from a cap perspective, relatively cheap. They were pushing their chips in to win games in 2023. So if they're in that situation come the trade deadline, they failed on their goal this year. And we can say stocks up for 2024 and beyond, but I do think that is something just for Broncos country to keep in mind. This isn't a rebuilding year, so to say. Like, they are genuinely really trying to win games and make a playoff push this season. Trading Justin Simmons, though, I do think if they're in that position, you've gotta. Like, unless there's no good deals out there, but I think he's a borderline first-round pick. Again, the contract there complicates things in terms of a talent. I think he'd be a first-round pick, but because there's 1 year on the deal and he's had a couple more injuries these past couple seasons, who knows? But I would think first, second-round pick range, you could get something for him there, and that would be very valuable to the Broncos, I think, as they're trying to rebuild. If this year blows up, it is going to be headed towards rebuilds in 2024, maybe 2025. And you're going to need picks to supplement that roster. Again, we're probably looking at a Russell Wilson cut. So draft capital is going to be at a premium. And you're going to have to make those moves early. Now, I kind of think it's in George Paton's best interest to not make those moves. And he's kind of the guy who'd be calling all the GMs. So I do think that's an interesting aspect to consider. But I do think it'd be in the Broncos' best interest if they find themselves no longer in a position to win now to move off of Justin Simmons. And frankly, maybe even a Garrett Bowles to a win now team. Like, the Patriots tackle situation right now is horrific. If they're in a playoff push, maybe they'd consider it. Again, just you cannot have expensive pieces on this roster if you cut Russell Wilson, or you can have very, very few of them, and you definitely can't have expensive pieces that are underperforming relative to their contract value. And so I think you could see a fire sale if the Broncos season is really dark.
Fuck. All right, well, I know you came here for optimism, Broncos country, but guess what? We'll be back. We'll have more coverage. Monday, you'll get us for Let's Talk Broncos on the recap show. Tuesday, you'll have Let's Talk Buffs as Zach Sears and Mario Vitanzi give you a little taste of what happened during the Buffs-Oregon game. Wednesday, we'll be live with Brandon Brandon Perna and Will Keys for the Let's Talk That's Good Broncos show. Still said it wrong. Thursday, you got Frankie and Joey, and we'll be back again on Friday for another preview show for whatever shit show week 4 has to bring us all. Zach, before we get off, though, because I want to leave people with something good, what's some positive news that they can look forward to?
I'll tell you some positive news. Bree and I are going to be back being crazy here on Sunday right after the game. So come back for that. She's finally joining me for a post-game show. I'm excited for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And what else is positive going on in the world? I got nothing for you, Bree. I got nothing.
We're out of here. I thought you were going to say something else. Okay.
I don't got anything. Scientists have reanimated a spider's corpse to pick up other spiders with it, but I don't know if that's positive. That seems nightmarish.
That's